Welcome back. So we've spent a couple hours on this Schwinn already, and we're getting there. It's got new shoes, it's got new brakes, it's got a fully serviced drivetrain. So today we're going to take a look at two other things. We're going to take a look at adjusting the seat post, which is normally not a big deal, but this one is rusty, and I'm pretty sure it's going to put up a fight. So I'll show you, well, we'll see how it goes. I might be mistaken and it'll just slide free, but I suspect we're going to have to use violence upon it. And so I'll show you some ways that might work with that, and of course maybe not. I have no idea. We'll find out together. And I also want to show you how to adjust the handlebar height. Well, actually, all the adjustments you can do with the handlebars, as well as how to service the headset. It's very similar to how the cranks work, except it goes this way instead of this way. So I will. We'll get right into it. We'll start with the seat post first. I'll show you a couple of variations that you might encounter, and we'll take a crack at cleaning it up, maybe knocking it loose, and if that doesn't work, we'll just move right along to the steering. Alright, so here we are at the back of the bike. There's a couple different ways this can go. So the seat post here is clamped by this bolt, which holds this clamp together. Because this has center pull brakes, it's also got this bracket for the brakes. If you have this type of brake, you probably also have the fancier brake levers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to release the tension on this. Like so. And then with these center pull brakes, you can just unhook this this crossover wire by pinching this together and just sort of wiggling your way out of it. Like so. So if you have the other type of brakes, so these are called center pulls. The other type is that you'd be likely to see is this. This is a single pivot side pull brake. So with this one, this brake cable would actually come off to the side, and there wouldn't be this bracket here. It would just go straight into the frame up here. You got a half-inch bolt on this side and a 9/16 nut on the other side. But what I'm going to do first is hit this post with a brass brush, just real quick, to knock some of the big stuff off of it. And the reason for this is, if we happen to have to really fight this, and if we have to like put downward pressure on it, I don't want the rust up here to be what's getting us stuck. So in this case, I'm going to take this all the way out. Normally to adjust it, you just loosen it. Oh, it turns. That's a good start. The reason I'm going to take this off completely is because I want us to have the best chance. There's a slit you may be able to see. You'll definitely see once I get the clamp loosened or taken off. There's a slit in this pipe, which is what clamps down to grab this. There may be rust all the way down into here. The inside of the tube is not necessarily painted, so the seat post and the tube can rust together. And so because I don't know what condition this is in, I just want to give us the best possibility of getting this thing out. And of course, while this stuff is out, I'll clean all of this stuff with that brush as well. If you happen to have a drill and a wire brush, that's the faster way to do it. Okay, so you can see the slit in here, and this is pretty tight, I think. And what I'm going to do is, because this is still attached and tight, I'm going to knock upwards on this, and we'll start gentle and then get rough if it needs it. Oh, we're in luck. So because this wiggles, we can just pull this straight up and out. Unfortunately, while this is rusting, it wasn't rusting absolutely everywhere. So that's a great result. If it rusts all the way around and all the way down and rusts together, like you can see where the water was coming in from the slit and making its way down through here and rusting all this out. If this rusts really tightly, you can be in a hell of a state. Sometimes you can put a pipe wrench on here and crank it. Sometimes you just have to get under here with the hammer and just beat the crap out of it. But this is good. If this pipe is no longer serviceable, there's one manufacturer making a replacement for it. They're reportedly not very good, so what I'm going to do with this is run around it with a wire brush. Because I have a grinder, I may run the wire wheel with that, just to clean it up a little faster. There's a mark right here that is the maximum height. So if you can see that mark, your seat is too high up. Goodbye, clamp. of course, the proper seat height is a matter of some debate, but the rule of thumb is usually that if you're sitting flat on the bike, supported by someone or something, if you can put your heel down all the way bottom dead center on a pedal, you should be able to just about straighten your leg, but not quite. This one was already adjusted pretty close for me, which is why I didn't start with it. While we're here, another major thing is a lot of these bikes had really crappy seats, just like current bikes generally have really crappy seats. This one is actually pretty nice. It has springs, which is kind of a must if you're commuting. It's in decent shape. It's also wide enough. You know, the many of the current ones are about this wide along the whole length, just about. And I just don't, and they don't have springs, and they usually don't have any padding, and I just don't know why you would want to stab your taint every time you hit a bump, but that seems to be the popular thing at the moment. But there are nice saddles like this that have proper springs and have a little bit of padding and are a little bit wider, and those are obviously the ones you would want to go for. This type of clamp should be reusable, so you could get another saddle and reuse this clamp. I've seen, like, some of the cheaper Schwinns, like the Collegiates, had a one-piece saddle where the clamp was like integral with the entire saddle, and in that case you would have to get a replacement clamp. What I had to do with the last one I did of these was actually turn the seat post upside down, because the neck narrows up at the top, and a modern clamp uses something closer to this larger diameter. This diameter of post is Schwinn specific, so just something to keep aware of if you happen to need another one. But this was a good result. I'm going to clean this up, and I'll clean up the hardware and put it back together, and then we'll take a look at the steering. All right. So I've gotten through this, ran around this with a wire wheel and a little bit with a file, just to knock off some of the big chunks. It's not pretty, but that's fine. It's just a seat post. I also took a second to knock some of the rust off of this. Anything in the back here is subject to a lot of water spray and stuff on a bike that doesn't have fenders. So, you know, this isn't pretty, but it's at least not glaring rust. And it is just an aesthetic thing. Incidentally, if you do have a center pull brake, with everything loosened up, this can fall right out of the frame. But this ferrule just hooks right into the frame here, and it'll hold itself in place once you've got everything back together. So with that being said, this is our seat clamp, and there is a notch on this bolt to keep it from turning on the half-inch side. So once this is slotted in, this won't turn very much, but it's not much of a notch, and so it's not a terrible idea to have a wrench on it anyway when you're putting it together. Doesn't matter which way around this goes particularly, but I happen to know that it went this away to begin with. So the bolt went through here and the nut went on the other side. So we just kind of love this thing on a little bit, just like that, so it's level with the top is fine. And we'll pop this bolt through here. Actually, we won't pop that bolt through here because we gotta hook this up. These also have notches. So, when this is sitting in here, the notch is there. So it'll be like that, more or less. Is that correct? That's correct. I'm fairly tempted and may put a little bit of grease on this just so it opens up easier, and I'm going to do it with the seat post tube, but very lightly. Not to lubricate it, just to have some sort of film on it so that in the future, because it goes a long time between adjustments, so that it doesn't rust to the frame on the inside. Grease is only sometimes for lubrication. It is often just to keep parts from rusting together. So like I said, just the barest film on this. Then there was about right for me, maybe a smidge higher. Go a ½ inch higher. And you just make sure the seat is in line with the frame. And then snug this down. Yeah, that's in line. Indeed. And with this model, you're also checking to make sure that this is in line with the brake. I believe it is. I'm going to test fit this off camera. Also going to wipe off the tiny bit of excess grease that I scraped off by putting that seat post in. And then we will call this good, I think, and head up front. Okay, here we are up front. Now, the way the steering works on these bikes is that the fork actually has a pipe welded to it that goes all the way up through here up to the top of this nut. So the fork is actually this tall. And then the handlebars bolt over this stem, and the stem is this L-shaped bracket that goes actually down into the inside of the fork and wedges together to hold itself in place. I happen to have some show and tell. So this is a forged steel stem off of a collegiate. This one is aluminum, this one is steel. It's the same deal. You can see how there's a bolt here which tightens up to clamp down onto the handlebar. Because this one is steel, it's threaded in the back, so there's no nut on the back of it. This one, because it's an aluminum stem, it has a separate nut on the back, but it works the same way. And then, so this slots down into the tube there, and then as this nut is tightened, it draws this wedge up and off to the side a little bit, and that's what clamps it, expands to clamp the stem into place. And so the first step to getting all of this apart is to loosen the stem, and the way you do that is you loosen this up with a 1/2-inch wrench, and it's not bad practice, once you've got it fairly loose like this one is, to pop this with a hammer, and that will force the wedge down if it's rusted into place, because this is steel, and that should loosen it up to make it easy to get out. So we'll start with that. It's reasonable for that to be good and tight as this one was. You can see we've got just a little bit of clearance now. I'm going to loosen this up a little bit more and we'll give it a wrap. Just like that. So now that's loose in there, and we stand a decent chance of pulling this out. Easiest way to do that is to just get astride the bike and yank up on the handlebars. Though this one is quite loose, fortunately. Alright. This has a slightly different type of wedge. It's got a conical wedge and a slit up the inside, so it's kind of the reverse of how the seat post works. Instead of clamping down on the seat post from the outside, this has a cone that is wedging this apart on the inside. It may not show up on camera, but just like the seat post, this has a minimum insertion distance. That's this notched line right here. So as soon as that's not visible, so right about there, that's as far up as this will go. And of course it can go down all the way. So for normal city riding, these drop handlebars are probably excessive, shall we say. They're a little too sporty of a position, especially that forged one. They were down so low on the bike that it came off of that I ended up buying a different stem entirely. There's one company, probably sensing a theme here, that makes a replacement stem for this, which is a very long stem, and where the L shape on this bracket points upward instead of downward, and that can bring the bars to a much more comfortable height. So we'll just tip this over and let it rest. The next step is to take off this nut. This is probably already loose. but we'll grab the comically large crescent wrench and give it a shot anyway. And that's loose. Alright. So this is analogous to the large nut on the outside of the cranks that we looked at already. This just clamps everything into place and keeps it from turning. We also have the shifters, which just slot on, and they just come off like that. This is the brake, and we'll have to do what we did on the back brake to take care of this. Again, this is only for center pull brakes, like this one happens to have. Actually, just give that a tug like that. So with all that out of the way, this nut is what actually sets your bearing tension. Okay, so you've got a cone in here. This is actually the cup, and you've got smaller bearings in here in a race, just like the crank had. This can knock out of the tube here, just like the crank one can. And you also have a matching cup and cone on the bottom. So I'm going to get reconfigured a little bit here and pull this out. Once all this is off, the entire fork will just drop right out. So I'm going to do that and kind of manage all of this crap, and then we'll take a look at this on a bench, and I'll show you the basics for servicing that. It's, like I said, it's almost identical to the cranks that we've already done before. Okay, so the fork is out. Like I said, it just drops right out. The one thing is, if you don't have a center pull brake, you'll have to disconnect the brake wire, or take off the brake itself. If you want to take off the brake, it's just one nut on the back of here, and the whole thing just pops right out. And that's all there is to it. Now, taking a look at this, this is the top race. So you've got the bearing race in here. You've got the this is the part that screws onto the top of the fork. So this is the cup, and see, it's got plenty of grease in it. It's not looking too bad. The bottom one, on the other hand, is looking pretty thirsty. So take that off. It's got a little grease in it left, but it's not in amazing condition. So just like with the crank, we'll just kind of wipe all this clean, take a close look at these surfaces and make sure they're in decent shape. You can again get replacements. They are Schwinn specific. There's a manufacturer or two that make them, so you can replace the whole thing. This is just held on by cussedness, so if you need to take this part off, all you have to do is put the fork down like this, put a screwdriver on it, and start whacking it with a hammer, and just work your way around, and it'll come loose at some point. and you can replace that. So for right now, just wipe some of this clean. Made in Japan. How fancy. Most of these, if they've got a forged style fork, these actually those were American made by a company called Ashtabula Bow Socket Company out of Ashtabula, Ohio. Alright, so with this cleaned up, we'll do the same trick with the brake cleaner. Spray these out. Now, one thing I forgot to mention on the crank video is that once you have these sprayed out and have the grease out of them, they'll still be packed with a bunch of grit. And though it's sacrilege to say so, what you can do is just spray them out with water. As long as you immediately dry it out with like a hairdryer or something. Water is a lot cheaper than brake cleaner, and once the grease is out, all you're doing is rinsing out the grit, and then once that's dry with the hairdryer, then you're ready to put it back together, and it's not going to rust in the 2 minutes or whatever that you have it wet. But we'll start with this one. I'll just let it rest in there. This particular headset has different sized bearings, top and bottom. The big bearings are on the bottom, the little bearing is on the top. Others I have seen from Schwinn have been identical, both sides. So, make of that what you will. I'll let those soak for a little bit and wipe this out. I'll just hit that with a little bit of brake cleaner too. Brake cleaner, incidentally, widely available at automotive stores and department stores. This is chlorinated, I think. They come in chlorinated and non-chlorinated. The chlorinated ones are better at degreasing. The non-chlorinated ones are slightly better at not killing you and the environment, if that's something you're worried about. As you should be, incidentally. That's why you're riding a bike, right? That or you're poor. So, helps to clean out the threads here. And you can see this is knurled, so you really only have to tighten this by hand, though if you got to take it apart, you can put a pair of channel lock pliers on it. So, that's looking pretty pristine to me. And these are looking much better. So I'm going to rinse these and dry them out. Also going to clean up the top of this. And then remember there's also a cup and a cone, or possibly two cups, on the bike frame itself that you should clean out and inspect as well. So, but for right now, I'm going to rinse these out, and we'll pack the bearings again, and put this thing on its way. This sacrilege is complete. These bearings are pretty clean. So, this is the one on the top. This is the one for the bottom. So what we're going to do is take our fork. Just the same as everything else on this bike. I've just been cleaning a little bit as I go. The bearing, this is the cone. So it's going to go down like this, and then the cup on the bike here will mate up with that. First thing I'm going to do is put a little bit of fresh grease on these threads, and then I'm going to pack the cone here with grease, and then we'll slip this up into the bike. And just like that. And plenty of grease up in this cup. The lower bearing is always what's going to get it, because it's doing most of the work and it's getting most of the water spray off the bike as you ride it. So in this case, I'm gonna seat this in right here. Oh, by the way, just like the crank bearings, it'll say Schwinn stamped into it if it's a genuine part, which these both happen to be. Pack that just a little bit more. Just like last time, we'll wipe out the excess once it's done. Some of this will squish back out too, but you can just hit that with a paper towel after you've ridden it for a little bit. So this goes up here, just like that. Then this guy we can pack on the outside. So then this one will face this way, like that. Wipe this round, get that all squished up in there. Wipe that off. And then this just threads on. I said it just threads on. There we go. Alright, so I just tightened this down till it stopped. and that's where we start. So crank this back and forth a little bit. That doesn't feel right. I think I might have put those bearing races in backwards. And indeed I did. Happens to the best of us. So, I just got confused in there. But anyway, this one was upside down. No harm done. Spin it back on. Yep, that is feeling much better. Honestly, that's just about right. This will be a little bit rumbly, but remember the bearing's not even loaded right now. It's going to have all your weight on it. So, and now that this part is done, then we can start putting back the other bits and pieces. Since this has center pull brakes, we'll put the bracket for that on first. And this has a notch in it, so it can only go either correctly or 180 degrees from correctly. Pop that in. Then these guys will go in like this, which means I got to do this in a different order. So like that. This guy. And then we got our clamp down nut here. And then this one can be good and tight, and this will keep the adjustment nut from backing off, and it will also keep all of this from wobbling around. These can work their way loose because, you know, as you're shifting, you are putting torque on that all the time, every time you shift. Let's see. Lucky enough I could put the smaller one on here. Nope. So, back to our big feller. Just get that decently snug. As previously mentioned, you can also use channel locks. And then, yep, that's still turning free. I'm going to wipe this and then put just a tiny bit of grease on it again. And when I put this back in, I'm going to put it to the minimum insertion mark, because I like to have my handlebars be pretty much as high as anyone was willing to permit in the 70s. So, smidge of grease. Just a smidge. The faintest smidge. That. You may be able to see the minimum insertion mark a little bit more clearly now. Clean up these cables a bit while I'm back down here. I've just been cleaning as I go, just as I've mentioned countless times already. So that's the minimum insertion depth. I'm just going to snug this for right now. Because I still have to straighten it and check and make sure everything is okay once I got the wheel back on it. That's just enough to keep it from falling out. This is, looks like from the witness marks about an inch higher, maybe 3/4 of an inch higher than it was originally, so that'll be a much more comfortable ride. But as it is, I'm going to put the brake back on and put the wheel back on, and we'll come back to tighten that up. Okay, we're back upright, put the wheel back on, and now we've got the kind of two last things to do here. We got to clamp this down the rest of the way, also make sure it's straight, and do the same thing with this. These, even though these are hooked up with, or even though they're located with notches, they've still got some back and forth slop, and if you're the sort of person who's bothered by something being off by a few degrees, that can be quite obnoxious. So just like before, just climb astride and hold the wheel in line with the frame, and I can see that this is cocked just a hair to the right. So we'll loosen this back up and nudge it over just a smidge. No, a little more. That's a smidge too far. And that's just about perfect. And we're still up about where I wanted it to be. So now we'll crank it down. Of course, you can adjust this as necessary. You don't have to be shy about tightening this. So that should be good. We'll do the same with this feller. Just to loosen off this nut. Probably see how this whole thing turned right as I loosened it. So just try and grab it and keep it from going too far as I tighten it back up again. That's about right. Also, while I was at it, this one, the bike had probably gotten dropped at some point, as all bikes do, and this had gotten banged in a little ways. I didn't even loosen this, I just grabbed and forced it back into position. However, they are clamped with a screw that goes straight back through here, and you can loosen off the brake cable or remove it, and then get all the way up in here with a flat blade screwdriver, and you can tighten it or loosen it. If you remove it, you will have a time getting it back on, especially if this has the original bar tape on it. I should probably talk about that actually. This pool noodle shit is an aftermarket edition, which I don't care for very much. Not because I don't mind having a thicker diameter bar, but because it's really squishy. So you're really just touching this old foam and crunching it right down to the bar, and then your hands are resting on a tiny diameter bar, no matter what. I may show in the future how to wrap one of these. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with this. With my collegiate, I got a couple rolls of new old stock plastic bar tape from Schwinn. This one I think I might go with some nice cork tape. I'm not sure. But for right now, this isn't broken up so much that I can't use it, so I'm just going to write this as it is for the moment. But that should be about it for this time around. It's a nice day, so I'm going to go take this for a spin and see how I feel about the adjustments I've made to the saddle and the handlebars. And then next time I guess we gotta talk about truing up the wheels. That's gonna be pretty close to it as far as general maintenance items. I could go over rebuilding a derailleur or rebuilding a brake caliper. Haven't decided on that. But definitely truing the wheels, because these need to be trued up. And once those are trued up, there's like nothing else that needs to be done with this thing. It is ready to ride. Really, it was ready to ride after the first video, but it's just getting progressively better, and it's just about done. So I think that's where we're going to leave it.